Detox, that is disruptive talks on literacy. And we have with us a very special guest today, Mr. Balaji Ganapathy. Welcome to the show, sir. Really welcome.
Thanks, Anupama. It's such a pleasure to be here and interact with you and the audience.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Online learning is more than video conferencing and online apps to deliver lessons to students. If the magic of learning has to happen in a virtual class, teacher must become digitally literate to be able to fluently combine digital skills with core principles of learning. So, today's topic on detox is Innovating India, Digital Literacy Education Solutions. And we have with us none other than Mr. Balaji Ganapathy, who serves as the Chief Social Responsibility Officer for Tata Consultancy Services, a global top three information technology leader. His mission is to harness the power of purpose, people, and technology to advance access, equity, and inclusion across society. Since 2015, TCS has invested $635 million on its community initiatives and empowered more than 32 million undeserved students, minorities, youth, women, and elders to be literate, healthy, educated, digitally skilled, mentored, become rural entrepreneurs, and gain employment, enabling societal uplift and generational improvement. A mission driven leader, he served as a chair of STEM Connectors, STEM Innovation Task Force, and empowers TCC Advisory Council. He serves on the US Chamber of Commerce Foundation's Board on Education, Employment and App Training Committee, World Economic Forum Steering Committee, Vice Chair of Million Women Mentors, MWM, Impact 2030's Advisory Council. Here's Business Council and Board of Women Business Collaborative. His paradigm, Purpose is a New Tech, has been featured in leading podcasts like Purpose 360, Purpose Inc., Common Impact, Brand on Purpose, and other publications like Real Leaders. Over to you, sir. We are very, very enthusiastic to hear your views.
Thank you so much, Anupama. It's a very, very kind introduction. More than anything, I would say throughout the past 2, 3 decades, the common thread for me has been how to create value for companies, how to create value for people in companies, and how to create value for the community. So, first of all, happy Republic Day to all of fellow Indians and others
Thank
listening
you.
on today's podcast. There is a great opportunity that lies ahead of us. We often talk about India at 74 or 75, depending on, whether you're looking at independence or republic. But I think the greatest opportunity that lies ahead of us is to understand our place in the world and how to empower people to really fulfill their own full potential. And so today, what I'm going to do is to take you through a few concepts that can help bring this out. I have a few slides if that is okay for your audience. I can go through that and then we can have a conversation about some of these concepts. Does that sound good?
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Okay. So rather than frame it from just a digital literacy perspective, what I want to do is to you know bring it up from a very basic perspective of where the need is the highest. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so let us set the context in terms of where the world is in today. We have crossed 8 billion people, of which more than half are in Asia, including Australia. We have another 1.4 billion people in Africa, about 750 million in Europe, and about 800 million in Americas. This is the world that we live in today. The world that we live in today is also much better off than where we were 20, 30, or 50 years ago. Obviously, COVID has had an impact on many of these parameters, but if you look at the access to basic necessities, more than 80% of people have some form of housing, more than 80% of newborns get basic vaccination, 90% of the population is getting some form of basic food, more than 80% have electricity, 90% have access to water, and most of the kids born in the world today go to school. Um, Many have improved sanitation, and most people have some form of clothes to put on. This is probably counter to a lot of the narrative that we see in popular media about the doom and gloom scenarios that the world is facing. But there is some sense of truth to that as well. If you look at the contrast between those who have access to these necessities and those who don't, it is very stark. And therein lies the real opportunity for literacy and the path to livelihood. If you look at the world in four quadrants, the kind of life that somebody leads is defined by the income level that they are in. These four large continents in the world that I spoke about, if you look at the income level of people there, less than $2, 1.73 is defined as extreme poverty. And you have about a billion people who are still living in extreme poverty. You have about 3 billion people living in the $2 to $8 bracket and 2 billion in the $8 to $32 bracket. And then more than a billion people who are extremely well off with more than $32 a day. What does this mean in real world terms? Somebody who is living at less than $2 a day, essentially the quality of life that they may not have a roof over their shoulders, they may not have a steady income or source of food for their family, they would not have a tap connection in their home, they would not have any mode of transportation, even if it is a rudimentary bicycle to take them from one place to another. And this is the kind of virtuous cycle, the vicious cycle of poverty that people are born into and often stay in. And if you look at what is the biggest lever to help people shift right, to move from these lower income levels to higher income levels, which brings along with it not only access to basic necessities, but longevity and quality of life, literacy is at the starting point of this journey. Even when you look at all of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is even if it is the 17 large goals that people are familiar with, or the 169 sub targets, it's a call to action for planet, people, and prosperity. But the path to prosperity again starts with access, and access starts with awareness. So, what you don't know, you don't have, is the biggest challenge that we need to overcome in order to bring equitably everybody along in the journey that we are in as a world. So, what is happening in India today? If you look at the India population, which is close to about, of course, the next census will tell us the exact numbers, but it's close to about 1.36 to 1.4 billion people. We have almost equal distribution of men and women, but then there it stops. If you look at the demographic dividend that is often talked about, it is because we have 371 million youth who are in the 15 to 29-year bracket, and another 164 million children who are in the 10 to 17-year-old bracket who are going to become productive citizens and participate in the economy in the coming years. But we are still marginalized based on caste, based on religion, based on economic level, based on spatially where we are located, based on literacy. So those parameters are also shown here. We still have about 178 million women who are illiterate and 100 million men who are illiterate, many of whom also are marginalized based on their ethnicity and race. So scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward castes. Now, we sometimes use these labels and understand it really well, but for you to get a picture of what this really means, I want to just tell you an example of something that I encountered 2 weeks ago when I went to one of the forest villages, One Gram as it is called in Jharkhand, a couple of weeks ago. These are tribal populations. They belong to one of the sects of tribal population called the Ho community. And the village that I went to, it took about 3 hours to get from Jamshedpur. Not because of distance, but because of lack of access. And once you reach there, this is a central point for about 4 to 6 villages which are there in that area. They did not have a school. They had what was set up as a bridge center for students who have never gone to school or were about to go to school through these interventions. And there were about 60 kids there from these 3 or 4 villages. When I got to know about and interact with the people there, one of the first things I realized is that they do not have access to electricity, they do not have access to steady water. They the roads, and of course, no school, right? So if you look at where they are set up in terms of the population and the path ahead of them, even the aspiration to go to school is a big one for them. The beauty is that when we interacted with the people there, similar to the serpent system, they also have Mundas and Mankis, which are tribal leaders. And when we interacted with them, the amazing thing that came out, when we asked them what is the number one need that you have, we didn't talk about anything else. The first thing they said was we need a school for our kids. The second thing they said was we need roads so that once the school is there and they go from primary school to secondary school, they will be able to go. And the road helps them also give access to markets where they can sell things that they are foraging and they are producing. Among the women, the first number one need that they said is that I want to change from using a thepa, which is the anguta as we all know it, the thumbprint, and I want to learn how to read and write. I want to be able to write my name. I want to be able to know what I am doing. And this is the state of some of the most marginalized people in the country. If you look at this population of 278 million illiterate people, there was one smartphone in the village and 4 feature phones. That was it across these villages. So, why is literacy important? It opens door to self-respect, which is Atma Samman. It builds self-confidence, which is Atma Vishwas, and puts people on the path of self-reliance, which is Atma Nirbharta. I think our Prime Minister has spoken about this at length. Many of our leaders from the social sector and the public sector have also recognized this need. But to me, this is the greatest opportunity we have as a country is to help people, empower them to respect themselves, build confidence, and be on a path of self reliance that can help move them from this vicious circle that they often are born into to a more virtuous cycle. And the other aspect is, from the days of Father of the Nation, Mahatma Gandhi, when he talked about literacy and the need for it, um, I think this is a problem that we have been tackling day in and day out. But if you even today, if you ask yourself, sometimes the people who live on the fringe of society, even visible to us, we take things for granted at many times. How many people do you know in your own network? Maybe your bhai, maybe your somebody who's your maid, somebody who is cleaning your car, somebody who is performing a task that you think is important for your daily life, but are people who live in the fringes of society. Have you imagined what life is like for them? And if you do, can you realize the value of that empowerment and that self confidence and dignity that they can gain if they have even access to basic literacy? We believe that the path to self reliance starts from functional literacy, because if you don't know how to read, write, and the three R's, right? Reading, writing, and arithmetic, basic numeracy, that makes you more productive citizens and participants in the community. Then, in today's world, the interactions that you have with people around you are through devices and through these sort of digital channels. So, it is important to also understand how to use those and use those effectively so that you can make your life easier and make informed decisions. But financial literacy is also equally important because um, traditionally, for ages in India, the women of the household have been the ones who have managed the finances. But if you have 178 million women who are illiterate, the ability for them to understand finances and manage it is extremely limited. So that is also an important reason why it, it is a holistic view of literacy that we need to adopt and look at it from the person and the people's perspective. What would they need in order to take control of their life, to make their own decisions? And that is why the path of functional literacy, financial literacy, digital literacy, and access to citizen entitlements, which is what the central government and the state government provides in all around the country, even access to that can make a huge difference in many people's lives. So, what is the state today? If you really look at the state of literacy around the country, we can break this problem into manageable chunks. The 12 states that contribute to the vast majority of illiteracy in the country are listed here. And as you would imagine, it is the most populous states with high density and high population growth, but it is also the states with the most marginalization. So, consequently, if we are able to tackle this and really help people, empower them through this path of literacy to livelihood, we can create huge economic change also. Because think about it, if in that 1 gram, that forest village, people have the knowledge of reading and writing, they know how to operate the mobile, they understand how to work on their finances, all of the things that we then asked that they did not have. Many of them did not know about the Pradhan Mantri Dhan Yojana. Many of them had a bank account but did not know about health insurance and life insurance. They did not have labor cards which are issued Mandrega under the Mandrega schemes. What if they had access to these things? That for us is a big deal, but for somebody who is ready to pay 200 rupees to get a solar installation so that they can charge their feature phone so that they can be connected to the rest of the world, or get a few hundred rupees so they can buy a bicycle so that they can send their kid to the school that is about 14 kilometers away, it makes a huge difference. And through that tiny little changes that happen at a very local level, because they are now more knowledgeable, they have access to citizen entitlements, starts the path to economic progress, because they start to participate in the economy. Kids start going to school, the parents start learning how to help them with their lessons. Access to marketplaces help them sell the talent that they have, whether it is in arts and crafts or it is in other produce that they are creating, and give them more access to markets where they'll get better returns on their products. Slowly, the income level in that community starts to raise, and their ability to actually take charge of their destiny and their future significantly changes. And this transformation is not a migratory transformation. This transformation is a very organic one that can happen at that same village and help that village grow. So, these are some of the elements to keep in mind when we talk about the opportunity that lies ahead of us. So I talked about the 12 states and how to break this problem down. If you really look at it, 131 million people who are illiterate are potentially Hindi speaking. Here again, some of the things that we do encounter as challenges is that there are various local dialects that are spoken. There are many tribal languages that are also spoken. I think we had to take this one step at a time, and the how to integrate or how to create paths for people to participate in the current economy is the first step, and then diversifying it to other areas where they are able to learn in their own languages can be a second step. So here is where we are today. If we know what is the opportunity that lies ahead of us and what are the large problem sets that we have to tackle, what are the challenges that are stopping us from achieving these? The conventional way of teaching somebody how to read and write is a chalk and board method, or chalk and talk as it is called, and it also is time consuming. Time is also equal to money for a lot of these people because they have to step away from whether they are daily wage workers or whether they are working in the farm or they are managing animals and those sort of activities. They have to step away from that in order to learn. So a classroom setting where they have to spend 200 to 250 hours, which is the traditional model, may not work with many of these populations that we are trying to reach. Even if that works, how do we solve the problem of teachers? For 270 or 250 plus million people to be literate, we would need millions of people who are trained teachers. Many of them actually don't even know what they are missing. So, even the understanding of the felt need of why literacy is important and what it can do for them. In the same example of the 1 gram, one of the young girls there was talking about how she came back from a high school, which is a residential high school, and is staying with her parents because her dad is injured and somebody who's a quack took money away and did not perform an operation that was supposed to save his leg. Think of if he had access to Ayushman Bharat and the other health schemes that are offered by the government. At least the money that they had would, their entire savings probably, will not be taken away in one single act like that. But when we spoke about these citizen entitlements and if they had access to it, what they could have done, I think it changed the outlook that, okay, even something like this is available. So I don't know because I was not literate. The family was talking to us about this. So I think the lack of felt need itself is something that we will need to change and address. And how society treats people who are literate is also, we often, as I spoke about, are happy or maybe not happy, but okay to let people live in the fringes of society and not be conscious enough of our own biases. Imagine if somebody came up to you and who did not know how to read and write and wanted to interact with you. The kind of dignity that we would show that person is, we cannot say for sure that the experience they're going to have is going to be the same with everybody, right? Majority of the time, um, this is the challenge that they encounter. If they go to a bank to do a transaction, they are asked to wait and treated very differently because they don't know how to read and write. They don't understand the financial transactions. This may be the same kind of treatment meted out to them in other places as well. So, the other aspect is that in order to learn the higher order skills of digital literacy and financial literacy, a foundational literacy is important. It is like, knowing how to balance yourself on a bike before starting to, go on a race. If you don't know how to balance, you pretty much know where you're going to land or not when you start the race. So I think that foundational literacy is again a barrier, because a lot of people may have access to digital because of advent of smartphones and telecommunication technology, but they may not really understand the power of it and using it to see WhatsApp videos or forwards that people are sending. I think that foundational literacy creates their mental model for them to be able to make sense of the world, complex world that we live in. So, how do we go about creating this? I want to end with offering an example of what TCS has been doing in this space. And while there are great models out there to really put people on a path from literacy to livelihood, this is one that we want to offer to all of the folks who are listening today, as well as organizations that are interested to work along in this mission. We call it literacy as a service. It started off as an adult literacy program, computer-based functional literacy program 20 plus years ago, under the vision of our first CEO, Mr. F.C. Kohli. He's also known as the father of the Indian IT industry. There, the idea was, how do you help people learn without uh, going through the barriers that I described to you in the last few minutes. The trick to it, or the way to solve this, is to use the power of technology, of cognition and perception, of how people learn, and then based on that, help bring this as an offering to them. So, in 50 to 55 hours, using this approach of theory of cognition and loss of perception, they are able to help people become functionally literate. And it is tested through assessment so that it passes muster in terms of what is construed as functional literacy in any standards by the government of India or any international standards. It is today available in 9 Indian languages and 3 foreign languages. And in the past 20 years, we have touched about 1 million people's lives through this approach. Um, the path that we are taking in the last year or so is a little different from what we have done in the past. And here again, I think keeping your audience in mind, the role of digital and the power of digital plays a huge role. Earlier, the model used to be to create this as a software package that can be delivered through trainers who are on the field and working directly with the end beneficiaries. It's a very deep engagement model, one that has tremendous results, but also doesn't set itself up for high scale. What we have done in the last year is to move this same approach, the great results and the theory of change, the models that are there, to be reimagined as a platform where literacy can be offered as a service to the nation by anyone, for anyone, at any time. So literacy by the people and for the people. What is that all about? Basically, in 55 hours, 50 to 55 hours, you can make anybody functionally literate. In 8 to 10 hours, you can help them be empowered to be financially literate. They can also understand how to use technology, how to use digital tools, smartphones, and internet in 5 to 7 hours. And the most important thing I would say in this whole aspect is access to citizen entitlements. Within 3 to 4 hours, they can get to know at least the 6 basic things that the central government and state governments provide them, and get access to that as well. Not just learn about it, but live, in a live and impactful manner, get help to set these things up. And that is the transformative power that technology has today. You, any of you, can become a volunteer and take this platform and take it to anybody whom you want to make literate. If you are a non governmental organization, an NGO, you can use this platform And if literacy is one of the bedrock of anything you want to do, some NGOs, this is your main focus. Others, this is the starting point, because even if you have to create health outcomes, you have to create educational outcomes, you have to create livelihood outcomes, entrepreneurship, basic literacy, whether it is with the beneficiaries or the consumer base, is the starting point. You can use this platform to create these outcomes. And what I would say is again that in the past 20 years of the original model that we adopted, over a million people we were able to reach and create literacy in. And the kind of impact that we have seen in among that population is immense. There is social impact, there is outcomes in terms of actual proficiency in reading and writing. I mean, when you talk about the social impact of people who become literate, almost all of them are sending their own kids, especially girls, to school. Their self esteem is increasing and they are able to participate in family decisions. Time and again, the stories that we hear is of people who, especially women, who have banded together to create self help groups because now they have the power of knowledge and they know how to manage finances, and they had their innate potential to do things, whether it is sewing, whether it is growing mushrooms, whether it is creating products that can be sold on e-commerce websites. Many god-given potential that people have, they were able to bring it out as a result of the step up from a literacy perspective. In certain communities, we have also seen that almost everybody is starting to access government entitlements. Most of them are seeing a change in the income levels that they have, and many of them are starting new businesses. Therefore, the engine of the Indian economy, the small and medium businesses, are starting to thrive as a result of this. So, there are many stories to share with you as well, but more importantly, I also wanted to end with sharing with you a model of how you can use this sort of an approach to create public private partnerships with the government to advance these outcomes. And this is a fairly new partnership that has emerged as a result of the literacy as a service model. This model we are adopting now in two ways. One is with the population of people who are workers or working in including TCS and other Tata Group companies. We have created a campaign called Each One Empower One, where using this platform, as I mentioned, you can add anybody that is in your network who is not literate and help them be on a path to functional literacy, digital literacy, and access citizen entitlements. But understand that every person's case is unique. You may have somebody who knows how to read and write. Many people may have dropped out of school when they were in fourth or fifth standard and are working in daily wage jobs. They may just need a refresher in terms of functional literacy, but where they need more support maybe in financial literacy, in accessing citizen entitlements. So this is a very modular program where you will be able to use this to empower people at, as per the needs that they have. The second model is the what I was describing as partnerships and collaborations with institutions to create literacy as an outcome for large scales of population. And that is where, if you look at Madhya Pradesh, it has three of the most illiterate districts in the country. About 7.5 million people of the 270 who are illiterate reside in Madhya Pradesh. And this has been an agenda of the state government, along with the central machinery, to really drive literacy among this population. So, what we're doing here is to take a top down approach where working with everybody who is there, who is part of the system today, whether it is a state literacy mission authority, leadership, the district level leadership, the block level leadership, the panchayat level leadership, the the block coordinators who are supporting them, the principals and the teachers who are in charge of literacy in these panchayats and villages, And then a unique concept called Akshar Sathis, which are young people or people who are really volunteers in the community, even today, across MP, who are the catalysts who bring literacy to the hands of those who are illiterate today. So this is a model that we are working in, and the interesting thing is that when you have a public system that is so keen and so eager to create these sort of outcomes, working together to create these outcomes becomes that much more easy. So we started with using this literacy as a service model and working along with the government to see what kind of solution works in MP and put that top-down approach together. The content and the curriculum is available. The model of engagement is available. The tools and the platforms are jointly from the state government as well as from TCS. And what has happened as a result of this is that everybody at the state level, at the block, the district level, and at the block level have the same the mission and purpose, but also have the same level of understanding of what it takes to create literacy among the population. And the tools that are required to do it are also available at their disposal. So today, what you're seeing here in terms of pictures are things that are happening on the ground today. We started with a pilot in summer of 2022, and from November, December of 2022, this is a statewide implementation that is happening in every district of MP. And the beauty is that the recognition frameworks that we have created are ones that are ground up. That is grassroots level up. Celebrating the Akshar Sathis, who are actually unpaid volunteers that are part of the state machinery, or celebrating the teachers and the principals who are responsible for literacy and are fulfilling their responsibility today. District collectors who are really bringing and shining the light on why this is important for the district and for the state and the country are helping fuel this grassroots level movement. And I believe that by the end of 2023, we will have very tangible results to report in terms of not only reach but also impact in terms of the outcomes on the community through literacy, but also all of the other areas that I spoke about. Through literacy, how that has helped them move to gain access to more of finances and manage their finances, as well as their adoption of digital, and most importantly, the access to all of the citizen entitlements. So here is where I would pause and come back to you, Anupama. This what I shared in terms of the world that we live in today, the context of literacy and why it is a bedrock for everything that happens in society, the opportunity or rather the problem sets that we are tackling, the models that we can use, and some examples of how they can be brought to life. I hope this is helpful for you and your audience to listen and hopefully give us also ideas in terms of what we can do better. If people are interested in how to contribute, I can certainly uh, share more links and details of how these platforms can be accessed. But I'll pause here and see any reactions and questions that you have for me.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening us with so much. We have with us in the studio Dr. Gandhi also, who would take over.
Hi.
Hello, Balaji. It's really lovely to meet you. Yes, delighted that we can be connected through Anupama on this platform. I think I've been hearing you, and basically, I feel it's really remarkable what is going on in Madhya Pradesh and what you're doing with every district of Madhya Pradesh. And of course, the 20-year effort that has gone into making people literate. I had a couple of questions. I wanted to hear your views on them. One is,
Certainly.
yeah. So one is that we're trying to handle the situation of literacy, foundation literacy, and numeracy from the point of view of the adult. And what about the children? What is your take on how to address FLN for children?
It's a very important question, and one of the reasons why we shifted from adult literacy program to literacy as a service is to address this need. The growing recognition that when you talk about illiteracy, it is counted as 15 and older, right? The age is 15 and older. And some of the systemic challenges that we see from age 15 and older occur much earlier in life, right? So, access to basic education, access to continued education, support system at the village level, whether it is their own family and parents or the larger villages that they reside in, the communities that they reside in. These are all important factors when it comes to not only obliterating illiteracy among adults but among young people so that we can have a fully literate nation for the future, right? The challenges are even higher today because the gap that exists between the jobs and the opportunities of today versus the skill sets that people are learning, even in the current education system, those gaps are itself pretty wide, and most of the efforts when it comes to education in the country today from the private sector or the social sector is addressed to is aimed at addressing these gaps. But the marginalization that occurs much earlier on, if we fail to tackle that, that is going to become an even larger problem that we as a country will have to solve later. I would say that it is really important on two counts, Sunita. I think one is when you have a literate population where people who are the parents of these young people are more informed, more literate, more participating in society, not just consumers of technology, but they know how to use technology for their daily needs, for creating things, to be entrepreneurs. I think the mindset shift itself happens in terms of why they should make sure that their kids are more literate. They are participating in the school systems, and if school systems are not there, this 1 gram example that I gave you, I mean, it was very touching to see that the first thing that the villagers said that they want, the parents of these kids, was a school for their kids. They don't say, okay, they can farm or they can forage or they can be artisans. They said they need to be educated first. So I think the innate desire exists among our populations that are underserved and marginalized today. I think it is leaders like you, leaders in the public and private and civic sector, all three coming together to address that is needed today. So the need exists, and the way to solve the need also exists. I think the will to prioritize that is what we need to have today.
Right. Certainly, I mean, I totally agree with you that if adults are educated, they ensure that their children are educated. And that is really paramount because even though education is out there, not everybody has enrolled their children. Though the government is saying, and the new ASA report is saying, that the attendance levels have gone up to 98% in India, which is totally remarkable. Not attendance level, I mean, enrollment levels. So the kids
Hmm.
are being enrolled more. I think there's more awareness. There's still a number of people who
Yeah,
don't, or perhaps the data doesn't pick up on those who enroll but don't come to school, and where the parents need to actually take active interest. So that,
certainly, certainly.
yeah,
And
the
there are multiple interventions that are needed there also, Sunita. So another area that we focus on once we tackle literacy as the foundation is education for K-12 grades. And there we work with school systems, again marginalized school systems in the country, government schools, residential schools, like the social welfare schools or tribal welfare schools across the country. And the experience that we have had again there is that aspirational parents are the reason why these schools are set up and are successful, because to send their kids away from their own villages to come and reside in a place. And this is, I hope you're familiar with these schools that the government set up in UP, in AP, in many states across the country. You have these school systems that are set up. Why I bring attention to that is that they are serving the most marginalized. And what you spoke about in terms of access, they get a lot of resources assigned from the government also. But the challenge remains very similar to what we see in other areas. Lack of the right kind of teachers, a lack of new age resources, lack of exposure to industry or what is the world happening in the world today, role models and mentors. So, as you're saying, I think the adult education part is an important one. The child education part is also equally important, but it will require a little different set of interventions to make the changes that are needed there. So, we have to work along with the system, but the kind of things that we should bring, I would say, are three things. One is content, the second is context, and the third is connection. Content which is more relevant to the world that we live in today. So 21st century skills, the NEP has done a big leap in terms of what kind of skill sets are required for young people today. What could be the frameworks that we need to work on at the national and the state level. But translating that into content that can be relevant today is important, so that when the NEP is established and the curriculum makes its way into the books 5, 7 years from now, the students who are going to school today are not left behind, right? That doesn't become our next marginalized population. So content is one. Context, how to use the things that they are learning in the context of the real world, is another thing that many kids, even in urban schools, miss today. So industry has to play a big role here in helping understand what are the jobs of the future, but also of today. What are the paths that can be created towards those jobs? How do you use the skills that you're learning in school? And demystifying all of this is key. Third part is connection, where access to role models and mentors is again for marginalized students, it is out of reach, right? They will not have anybody in their own village or in their family or in their whole generations who would have gone to companies that are doing new age work today. So even getting access to mentors and role models who can spend time with them, empathize with them, because all of us have come from a village at some point in life, right? As we are a small, pretty young country, 75 years, right? So we have all grown through this transformation in the last 75 years. If we can find the humanity in us to go back and connect and be that catalyst, I think the content and the context along with this connection can really make a difference.
Fantastic, Balaji. It's definitely a very good framework by which things can be understood and better promoted. I was just wondering, you've been working with NGOs and civil service organizations, civic service organizations, and you've now started to work with the government. As you're saying, this might be a better modality to go forward. What is your like proposition? Because India is still pretty illiterate. Like we have 37 million people, I believe, who are illiterate, and we're the largest body of illiterate people in the world. So, what is your take on like how to scale this up? How to and what are the lessons that have been learned? Like what has worked well? Obviously, on the basis of that, you've come up to here. But then going forward, what would you suggest are the ways to go? To tackle the big problem.
This is an important question for us to ask since we are 75 years from
We
our
can't hear you
independence.
very well. There's some jitteriness. It was coming perfectly a minute ago.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. So I think the key thing to understand is we are 75 years from our independence, and we still have about 270 million people who are illiterate in India, right? So that is the problems that I spoke about. So what can we do? I think we have to take an all of the above kind of an approach, right? One approach alone is not going to be enough. So we have to first understand that this tent is wide enough for everybody to participate in, whether it is individuals who care about this, whether it is small organizations that are very local in remote parts of the country, whether it is larger organizations and NGOs who can aggregate and act as conveners, whether it is civic society organizations that are representing these NGOs as well as the interests of the public, whether it is government organizations that are tasked with addressing these issues, or large private institutions that have the resources, they may have the workforce, they may have the reach to these communities. So I don't think we can leave anybody behind, right? And if we really take this as a problem of our time or an opportunity of our time to solve and bring attention to it, it can make a transformative difference. The problem set itself is not very well known today. right? Because India is large, we have so many things that we need to tackle. The understanding that we have, almost 15% of our population, 278 million, is not a small number,
Right. Right.
right? So recognizing that is the starting point, and the lessons are that we cannot wait for 30 years, 20 years, 10 years to solve this. We have to have the urgency along with the solutions to be able to tackle it in scale. And what the example in MP is highlighting, our estimates is that already a million people have become or are in the path to become literate by the end of this quarter as a result of this effort, right? Because the whole machinery from the government side all the way down to the community, along with the right resources that are available to solve this problem, is existing. The skill is there and the will is there, right? The both have to exist for this to be solved. And if people who are listening, people who are your audience, if you think about what each individual can do, also I mentioned this can be solved even one person at a time. Even if each one of us say, I will make one person literate a month, you can make at least 10 to 12 people literate in a year, right? And multiply that with your network. If each of your friends do that, you have a few hundred to few thousand people made literate. I mean, these small acts go a long way. And my point is that we need to bring attention to this and use a not a one size fits all, but a big tent where everybody has a role to play, but with the urgency that this needs to be solved here and now today.
Right, absolutely. Could not agree more. There's the issue also of how to mobilize the crowds, the populations to get involved, because Ernakulam,
Mm.
1989, and so
Mhm.
many ways in which we can actually speed up the whole process of making people literate by involving the populations in any whichever way. So,
Yes.
if, for example, MP agreed, just theoretically, that they could take a particular district, let's say Harda, and make it literate in the microcosm of that particular district to run a
Mhm.
campaign, a people's campaign, in which everybody gets involved. Uh, I mean, what could change the fortunes of the illiterate overnight, literally? I mean, we're talking about 55 hours. That's not a lot of time to give and to become literate. So, what's your thought on a people's movement?
Ultimately, it is the people's movement that is making it happen, right? Even in MP, the Akshar Sathis are the people. They are people from the community who are in, they don't have a financial incentive. They only have a moral incentive of service, of making a difference in their community. So, absolutely, a people's campaign is what can drive this. But I think it can be elevated at different levels, right? So, why did Swachhata Hi Seva is something that we will all remember in our lifetimes because the whole nation came together to clean India, right? So Saksharta Hi Seva, or a campaign like that, which is right from the top, from the prime minister or from leadership in the country, can help solve this in a very quick way. But we also have to, like I said, use other networks that exist. We have a large network of NCC organizations in the country. We have Rotary clubs that are working in this space. So I mean, what I mentioned as an example was a public-private partnership, but we have partners of all kinds. Rotary is a partner for us. What they are doing in Palgad and in Maharashtra, for example, is use the same model, but work through their network and their volunteers, take this to the tribal and the backward communities in the region and create literacy outcomes, right? So I think what the mass campaign can do is to mobilize everybody towards the same cause for a period of time, and that can create a huge wave. You're right. So that could be on the wish list.
Fabulous. I think, Anupama, if you have a question from the audience or your own, you should ask. I have lots of questions always, but I'm interested to know about the subject, also how to involve, for example, I don't know if other questions are there first. Let's take those. Um, yeah.
Um, Bas-
A lot of
I
good comments. I can see everybody saying great, excellent. I think this is
yeah,
outstanding. Thank you so much, and so forth.
yeah.
Um, yes,
What are the
proceed.
challenges with digital education in India, sir? Now that you've talked about the grassroots and
I would say, simply put, awareness, access, and connectivity are some of the symptoms of the challenges that we face today. Awareness itself is missing in many cases in terms of what does
True.
digital literacy mean. Is it just using a computer? For what purpose? Is it using
yeah,
a phone? For what purpose? Right?
yeah,
So I think those are getting addressed in many ways today, the more than in the last 5 years, or I mean prior to the last 5 years or so, because you have large efforts that are going on, digital efforts that are going on from the government and other concerned parties. But once awareness is there, I think the access problem is a big issue, right? Is it affordable to buy digital devices today? Yes, more than ever before, more than many parts of the world. But if you look at digital penetration in India today, I think it is still 23 or 24% of the population who actually use the internet for some purpose, right? So that's not a big number. So we are leaving a huge set of our population behind in this aspect. And even if somebody owns a device, connectivity is then the third issue, right? Certainly private sector and PSUs are working to resolve some of these issues. Affordability is increasing every day, connectivity is improving, but I think the basic awareness of why digital literacy is going to help you in not just the basic ways of using a smartphone or a computer, but to define jobs, careers, productive work, economic value. I think that is a bigger path for us to take. We are a smart set of people, so I'm confident that we will leapfrog much as we did in the adoption of mobile phones. We leapfrog from the rotary and the landline phones of the past. I've seen that in my lifetime. And I'm pretty sure in the digital skills and the digital literacy space also we will leapfrog. But a moment has to arrive for that to happen. And I think a lot of organizations are working towards that.
thank you so much, sir. It's been such a pleasure listening to you and very, very enlightening talk, sir. So I will end the live show here, but we please request you to stay on in the studio for a couple of more minutes. I will say goodbye to the audience here. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Detox, and we'll continue this series of talks. And it's been very, very enlightening, and it's been our honor to have Mr. Balaji on our show today. So this is Anupma, your host, signing off with, and Dr. Gandhi also says goodbye.